All right, guys, so I'll actually be going solo on this episode, and I want to give you my opinion on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and why I think it points to a deeper problem that I see unfolding in our country. I've been thinking about it for a while, and it does tend to get me down, but we have to remember not to be cynics, okay? Oh, the whole freaking world is corrupt and there's nothing we can do about it, right? We're not allowed to be cynics in that way, guys. We need to fight for what's right in whatever way we can. It's like Gandalf says, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. And by that, he didn't mean just go and smoke a bunch of pipe weed. I mean, it's understood that you should do a little bit of that too, but you have to do good things for society as well. Pipe weed, by the way, just means tobacco, so no funny stuff. Anyway, let me tell you what's on my mind. Let me cut to the chase. The very fact that there is a Kyle Rittenhouse trial is a complete travesty. Rittenhouse is charged with first-degree intentional homicide. But self-defense, by law, in Wisconsin as well as everywhere else in the world, trumps that charge. Obviously, yes, Rittenhouse killed two men and injured one other, but in self-defense. The reason I say the trial shouldn't have even taken place in the first place is because it was evidently done in self-defense, that it was so evidently self-defense. What I'm saying is that the district attorney of Kenosha should not have initiated the charges in the first place, and the court commissioner should not have allowed it to proceed to trial. The thing is, the videos are available, and I'll link the videos below for you guys to be the judge. The first video is the first shooting, and I'll just go over it briefly here. So in the first video, we see Rittenhouse is being chased by Joseph Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum throws some kind of bag at him. Rittenhouse continues to flee. Then there's a shot from behind that momentarily distracts Rittenhouse. And by the time he turns around to Rosenbaum, Rosenbaum is lunging towards his gun, yelling "F you." And that's when Rittenhouse shoots him. How is it not self-defense when someone is chasing you and lunging at your weapon, shooting "F you"? Okay, how is that not evidently on its face a matter of self-defense? And the other two shootings were even more obviously a question of self-defense. So you can see this in the second video linked below. Okay, see what happened after Rittenhouse shot Rosenbaum is that people started to gather and a crowd started to chase Rittenhouse. You can see this. So Rittenhouse is now running towards the police cars, and you hear several people in the crowd. They're shouting, "Get him! Get him!" He shot someone. Get him! And so then you see that someone hits Rittenhouse in the back of the head, and after like a second, he falls to the ground. And then once he's on the ground, some people rush at him. Rittenhouse shoots this first guy who comes at him and is like about to stomp his face. And this one, actually, Rittenhouse misses. But that guy kind of backs away. Then right after, almost instantaneously, another guy, and this was Anthony Huber, he hits him in the face with the skateboard like a couple times. And this is like so fast, like instantaneous. And at that moment, Rittenhouse shoots him in the chest. Huber, he dies, by the way. Immediately afterward, Gage Grosskreutz, he's the guy with the gun. So Grosskreutz, he has a gun in his hand, but he initially raises his hands like in a surrender position. But then he directly points his gun to Rittenhouse. And this is when Rittenhouse shoots him in the arm, actually. So Grosskreutz, he actually survived. He's the one who was just injured. Now, at this point, Rittenhouse then gets up and he continues on his way toward the police. So here's what we have to consider. The only thing that matters in a charge of first-degree intentional homicide is whether Rittenhouse, at the moment of shooting, is doing so in self-defense or not. And that's it. Like, the videos make it obvious on its face. Frankly, it calls into question the motivations of the prosecutors. And, at this moment that I'm recording this video, the trial is still ongoing. I mean, the jury should find him innocent. It's a no-brainer. And yet, given the factious nature of this case, I don't think we can 100% count on that innocent verdict. You have people trying to take pictures of the jury, people trying to figure out who they are. The judge had to confiscate a phone. And I won't play it here, but there are already people threatening the jurors and threatening riots if this doesn't go the right way, aka a guilty verdict. Dude, I'd hate to be a juror in the Rittenhouse case, because we know that the danger to your own life and livelihood only comes from one particular verdict and not another. I mean, am I wrong? Meanwhile, the case for the prosecution has been embarrassingly bad. Grosskreutz himself admits that Rittenhouse didn't shoot him until he pointed his gun first. I mean, again, this is all in the video. It almost makes you think, why is this trial even going on in the first place? May it have something to do with prejudice? Yeah, prejudice. I mean, look at this guy. The hat on backwards, obviously a Second Amendment nut, probably a Trumpy little bastard, right? He reminds me of this guy, right? This guy here. I wonder whatever happened to that whole thing. Now, I know what many of us are thinking. Like, why in the hell is Kyle Rittenhouse there? Why is he there with a gun? Okay? And yes, I do think that it was completely imprudent of him to be there, and with a gun especially. But let's get one thing completely straight here. This was not a kid that went into the heat of the action with an intent to kill black people based on some skinhead ideology. First of all, none of the people that he shot were black, okay? But whatever. I mean, when you look at all the video footage, because there is a lot of video footage, it shows the complete maliciousness and falsity of that narrative, okay? True to what Rittenhouse himself claimed of himself in a video interview that same night, but before the events took place. He said he was there to offer first aid to anyone hurt. He was there to put out fires, clean graffiti. Okay, like he was actually cleaning graffiti there as well. I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous. And he claims, and yes, and I have my weapon for personal protection. And sure enough, when you see the footage, you see him running like a crazy person everywhere, like trying to be useful, like he's yelling all over the place. Who needs medical? Who needs medical? Watch the videos. And you see him running towards fires with his fire extinguisher. Okay. In fact, in the seconds before Rosenbaum started to chase him, he was doing the same thing. He was shouting along in the sidewalk. He was shouting, who needs medical? And he was making his way towards another fire in one of the car lots. My point is, I mean, look, I was 17 once too. And to me, it's obvious that we have here a young idealist kid with a big sense of masculine mission. You know what I mean? Like a ROTC kid, obviously really into discipline and being a soldier. I think he himself has said that he wants to be a policeman, okay, or something along those lines. Everything he did before he was chased was to just look for people to help and to put out fires. He wasn't instigating anything. He wasn't throwing insults to anyone. Even when he does shoot, it's not like he's shooting at all the crowd. He's obviously really well practiced with the weapon. The only people who were shot were people who were directly on him trying to grab his gun, and Grosskreutz who came at him and pointed his pistol to his head. He doesn't shoot Grosskreutz until the gun is actually pointed at him. And this is after he's been knocked down with a rock and hit with a skateboard. Now look, we don't need to make a hero out of Kyle Rittenhouse, okay? But he did demonstrate heroism and more courage than I ever will, okay? But I do think that he was foolhardy and imprudent. I mean, think about it. He was bound to attract the attention of some Antifa thug, okay, with his medical bag and his gun, okay? And as a matter of fact, I believe that all three of the guys that he shot have criminal records. Rosenbaum, for sure. He was a serial child rapist. Maybe Rosenbaum was trying to rape Rittenhouse. I don't know, like he lunged at him and he was screaming, F you. Okay, but anyway, what I'm saying is that I could have told Rittenhouse that something like this was bound to happen. He shouldn't have taken his gun, But at the same time, I wouldn't recommend you go into that riot unarmed either. So in other words, he should have just stayed home. But then again, that's the boring perspective here of a non-17-year-old of high ideals. I have to admit, even though I think it was imprudent, I have to admit that his courage and his obvious idealism and genuinely trying to help out in a community does make me a little ashamed of myself. Look, I get it. This is not an outcome that we want. This is why you see on its face of it how imprudent he is and how 17-year-old idealist kids can get you into trouble or, can cause bad outcomes. But anyway, we'll see how this ends. And by the way, you might be wondering why we're even talking about a case like this in the Worldview Bros. We don't usually cover something as specific as an ongoing trial, right? We like to look at big picture ideas. But I did feel compelled to talk about this case because I think that it's just another example of something that has been worrying me in the last 5 years or so. And that's the deterioration of our institutions and the breakdown of the rule of law. So we've prided ourselves as Americans as having the best criminal justice system in the world, right? And it probably still is, but I do think it's deteriorating quickly. Now, I've defended the criminal justice system broadly against the charge of racism, and you can actually check our work on that below. I won't rehash it here, but I do want to link the video that we have where we discuss the whole question of potential racism in the criminal justice system. But no, to me, the real problem is that our governmental institutions are more and more becoming the weapons and the playthings, particularly of the political left. The Rittenhouse case is just a minor example of it. I first started paying attention to the weaponization of our governmental institutions when it came to light that the IRS, under Obama's term, was targeting Tea Party groups applying for tax-exempt status. You'll remember that the IRS executive involved here was Lois Lerner, and this was back in 2010. And this was at the apex of the Tea Party movement. So in that case, the federal government settled a class action lawsuit in Ohio. Okay, they admitted to the wrongdoing and they paid these Tea Party groups something like $3 or $4 million. And now I do get it that like loss of tax exempt status. I mean, that sounds pretty boring and benign. But you have to understand, guys, like I'm 38 years old. And for people who grew up in the 90s and the aughts, you don't understand the kind of reverence that people had for all the alphabet soup institutions, the FBI, the IRS, the CDC, and all the rest, right? They're supposed to be above politics. Now, I don't really believe that that's possible, okay? But in terms of public opinion, the idea that the IRS would engage in political targeting of opponents would have been completely mind-blowing. And, this is the whole reason why Watergate was such a huge scandal in the 70s, which honestly, Watergate, I mean, is a freaking joke compared to some of the stuff that we've been seeing in the last few years. Okay, the time is very different now. We almost expect corruption everywhere in the so-called deep state, right? And indeed, things are happening. Another example that left me dumbfounded was the whole fiasco with James Comey's FBI and Hillary's server and the emails. You guys remember a little bit about that, right? But we do need to remember these things better, guys, because time passes and we lose the outrage. We end up not caring or not doing anything about it to help to keep our government accountable. And it's incredible, the stunt that Comey pulled with that. I do want to remind you about a few of the details. And this all had to do with his statement in July of 2016. And of course, I'll link his statement below. It's all based on that. And in this statement, I mean, he devastated Clinton, right? I mean, he makes the clear case that she was guilty of mishandling confidential information, that she compromised our national security, and that she lied time and time again about it. And yet Comey concludes at the end of the statement that no charges are appropriate. Andrew McCarthy at the time went over all the details with this, and I'll link his work as well. He always does really good work with the National Review. But the gist of Comey's statement is that Hillary checked every box required for a felony violation, specifically of Section 793F of the Federal Penal Code. Okay. Comey explained that the investigation found that Hillary used various servers, not only one, as had been previously stated, okay, and that she used various devices to unsafely receive and send confidential information. They found that while some of the emails were only upgraded to a confidential status afterwards, many of them were confidential at the time, and many of them, some of them were actually top secret at the time as well. And so Hillary had been lying all along that she never handled anything that was confidential at the time, right? She also lied about her rationale for the private server, that she wanted to manage her emails on just one device, like completely lame excuse. I mean, maybe it seemed plausible because she's a boomer or something, okay? But she obviously knew what she was doing. And of course, she has all kinds of aides helping her to figure these things out. So the question is, why did Comey recommend no prosecution at the end of the day, even though he laid out the whole case? And here is where, honestly, we just see the transparent deception and the open corruption from these guys. Comey says in the statement that he cannot find any evidence that Hillary had the intent to harm our national security. Okay, the intent. But 793F doesn't require intent. 793F simply states that there must be gross negligence. And Comey himself says in the statement that, quote, that they, meaning Hillary and her colleagues, were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. Well, there it is, gross negligence, guilty. But he disregards this. Instead, he focuses on the fact that there was no intent. See, the trick that he seems to be trying to pull here is that there are other laws that account for mishandling confidential information with intent. That's 793A. Okay, so it's like Comey is setting up this straw man. Hillary is clearly guilty of F, but then is said to be clearly innocent of A. Okay, that's how this bastard was playing. So Hillary was clearly guilty, and Comey just clearly didn't want to recommend prosecution. But I got to show you the most infuriating part of Comey's statement. Like, to me, it's unbelievable. Here's what he says. This is a quote, guys. And he says, I'm not going to try a Comey voice, but just imagine the most obnoxious prick that you can imagine, right? To be clear, this is not to suggest that in similar circumstances, a person who engaged in this activity would face no consequences. To the contrary, those individuals are often subject to security or administrative sanctions. But that is not what we are deciding now. Guys, all you can say is, wow. If you don't dig into these things, we don't realize the games that these people play. Okay, guys, he's literally saying that if it had been any Joe Schmo, that they would have done something about it. But Hillary Clinton is not Joe Schmo. She's American royalty. Okay, too big to fail. Too freaking big to fail. And of course, I remember at the time racking my brain reading this. I mean, if he loves Hillary this much, why wouldn't he just lie a little bit more and just say that she didn't do anything wrong in the first place? And I don't know. I mean, my guess is that, as always, Comey was just trying to have his cake and eat it too, right? See, at the time, it was obvious to everyone that Hillary was about to win the 2016 election. I mean, it was a done deal. Like, nobody gave Trump a chance, right? And so maybe Comey, fearing that the truth of Hillary's shenanigans would come to light, he didn't want the FBI to look like the corrupt snake's pit that it really is. So maybe he wanted it to look plausible that the FBI was concerned at the time, but I guess just not concerned enough to actually do anything about it. Or, well, to recommend that any charges be made. So with 1 foot in and 1 foot out, Comey just ends up showing his full ass, begging your pardon, okay? I mean, for people who are looking anyway. And, okay, I know I went a little deep with that, and I don't want to bore you with too many details. But guys, if we start counting like the sketch interventions of the FBI in the last few years, like we're only getting warmed up. I'll just quickly mention a couple more things. The whole plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer, you guys remember? I mean, that was a whole FBI creation. Digging into it a little, I wanted to go through this article with you, but I'll just leave it in the description. Super interesting. It's another obvious example of a weaponized and a partisan FBI. But of course, even more interesting, and we'll just kind of end with this. But now we're finally getting confirmation that the whole thing with the Steele dossier, not surprisingly, was a complete and utter fraud from beginning to end. For 4 freaking years, guys, for 4 freaking years, Trump carried like this albatross around his neck about the freaking Russian collusion. And now, okay, so now Igor Danchenko, one of the sources of Christopher Steele, of the Steele dossier, he's now being charged for lying to the FBI. And you know, Steele's dirt digging had never passed the smell test from the beginning, okay? And it was funded by the Clinton campaign. And you see, this isn't about Trump's merits for me, okay? It's about understanding the swamp, y'all. It's about understanding what is going on with the swamp. That you can get the FBI to follow a bogus scent, okay? That if you're lucky, it cuts your rival's presidency short. And worst case scenario, it hangs over him for the whole presidency, making him appear illegitimate, okay? I mean, how gullible did the FBI have to be to give legitimacy to this crap? But then again, if the text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page are any indication, the FBI was probably only too happy to go on that chase. You know what I mean? That's the problem. Look, I know this is such a rant, but let me just end with that exchange between Page and Strzok. Remember, these were FBI agents, y'all. And remember what I said, like FBI, oh my gosh, like these guys are the epitome of objectivity, you know, not partisan, right? We can't imagine that these institutions are tainted by partisanship. So Page texted Strzok. She says, Trump's not ever going to become president, right? Right? And Strzok responds, no, he won't. We'll stop him. So what's the point of this, y'all? The point is, don't just assume that governmental institutions are run by angels. They're run by humans, by sinful, fallen humans. We need to pay attention to what happens, guys. We need to criticize the wrongdoings. Okay, it's part of our duty as citizens to apply pressure. You're an American. Okay, you need to have prickliness and more scrutiny of the government. This is why it only makes sense to fight for decentralization and for the primacy of small and local power. Ultimately, we need to roll back the clock and get rid of the administrative state and go back to the Constitution the way it was. But I know I'm pretty extreme. We'll talk about that another time. In the meantime, guys, please let me know what you think in the comments. Understand that I do not mind if you disagree with me. As you can see, I have my particular views and I love to defend them, right? I'm very vocal about them, but I love even more to hear other perspectives. I love to hear from you. So please tell me, what am I missing? And let me know if you want other topics for us to cover. So let me know. Thanks for hanging with me here, y'all. And that'll do it for today. I'll see you on the next episode.